Okay, we're going to call to order, please. We do have a quorum available. I'll just keep talking to myself until we get everybody. Hi, Jen. You've been busy this afternoon. Yes. Okay. We do have a quorum, and we'll do some introductions going around. And I'm Jim Moore, at-large and chair of the Community Advisory Committee.
I'm Jessica McMullen, the PPACG Policy and Communications Manager.
I'm David Waters.
Jan Martin on the board of HPTE.
Kevin Walker, I'm at-large and first vice chair, but I don't know exactly what I don't have my name in front of me, so I don't know what I am.
So later, if we take attendance, we won't know you were here.
I may not be here, exactly.
And moving to her place of honor is Jen Nellinger, who is a former past chair of this august body. In our group over here, please.
Mark Andrew Acita.
Okay.
Jennifer Webster, Blueprint Strategies with the I-25 project team.
Okay.
Cinnamon Watson, also with Blueprint Strategies and the I-25 project team.
Okay.
Rick Sonnenberg, Interim Executive Director, PPACG.
Thank you.
Ken Braylor, PPACG.
Thank you. And staff back there today.
Kevin Reyes, PPACG.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Sure.
Okay. So thank you all. On the consent items, I would like to make one adjustment on the agenda and move item 6B up under the public comments area because Rick has a meeting that he has to get to instead. Is there any objection to that? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Okay, there's a motion and second. Any comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Public comments. You're up, Rick.
Good afternoon again. Rick Sonnenberg, Interim Executive Director, PPACG. Just wanted to give the CAC an update on the board's search committee and the status. As you know, there's a 10-member search committee that was appointed by the PPACG board to, sorry, I'll be a little louder. A 10-member search committee searching for an executive director, new executive director for PPACG was established by the board. They've met several times. They requested board approval for to go out and seek search firms to assist with the search for executive director. The board approved the concept and a plan for the committee to be able to select a search firm. The committee sent out 17 invitations to known search firms plus general advertisements elsewhere. The committee received 6 proposals from search firms. They've been prioritizing and shortlisting the 6, tentatively down to 2. And on Friday in this room, Friday afternoon from 3 to 5, they will have personal interviews with the top 2 firms with the goal of, at the end of the day on Friday of this week, to select a firm to then enter into a contract and for that firm to begin the search or to continue the search for an executive director. Most of the search firms have a 2 to 2.5 month search process. So assuming we can nail down a firm and get them to sign a contract next week sometime, and they get started next week, then they'll take all of July, all of August, and probably the first half of September to then bring in candidates for the committee to review and prioritize, potentially presenting a top candidate or maybe a top two candidates to the full board at the September 13 meeting, but more likely the October 11 PPACG board meeting.
Questions? Appreciate you.
I just have one question there. It's really related to the strategic plan. Is it your goal to hold off on the strategic plan until you have a new executive director?
Yes, that's the board's decision, yes.
Thank you very much, Rick. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Have a happy meeting later.
Thank you.
Okay, are you going to introduce Jan, or do you want me to introduce Jan?
No, be my guest.
Jan Martin and I go back farther than either one of us want to admit. But we're just delighted to have her here as our second speaker to orient us to the, and I'm going to look at it because I didn't memorize it, the High Performance Transportation Enterprise.
I still have trouble with it, so it's okay.
Okay, well, you have 30 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we'll get started. I was appointed to the board of, we call it HPTE. Let's just settle for that. It's a little easier to remember. The HPTE board in Denver. Not long after I left City Council, Jeff Green actually approached me and asked me to apply, and then I got appointed by the governor. And I have to say, since I've been off council and looking for new things to do, this is probably the fun thing that I've been able to do. HPTE is a enterprise of the state that is designed to come up with creative and innovative ideas to solve some of our transportation issues in Colorado. And because we're a separate enterprise from the actual state government, it gives us some flexibility in financing options and some things that we can do. Here in Colorado Springs, we're not very familiar with this because most of the projects have been up in the Denver area and west on I-70. But if you've driven in Denver at all recently, you've probably noticed the new toll lanes up in Denver on I-25. Those are HPTE projects. We also did the US 36 between Boulder and Denver. That was an HPTE project. And the opening of the new lanes on I-70 west up towards the mountains is also an HPTE project. We've got several others we're working on, and we were lucky today to have the actual director of operations from HPTE here, who's brought a presentation with him. And we'll go through his presentation, and then we'll take a few minutes and be glad to answer any questions we might have for you. But thanks for having us. It's fun to introduce HPTE to Colorado Springs this afternoon. Welcome, Nick Farber.
Thanks, Jack. All right. So we are in, we call it the innovative era of transportation. Used to be that you just had the choice of general purpose lanes when you went to get in your car and go somewhere. Now we call it the innovative era of choice. Now you have the GP lanes, you have transit, you have bike ped, and we've added tolled express lanes to that as well. We call them express lanes. And we're also in the new innovative era of funding, since we don't, the state sales tax didn't pass this year, and we're looking under the couch cushions for funding. We're coming up with new innovative ways to fund these transportation projects, like US 36, Central 70, the Mountain Express Lane, I-25 North. I'll get into a little bit details on those later, but it's how we're coming up with new and innovative ways of finding money for these projects to get them built. The Transportation Commission a couple of years ago said that any time a project is to add capacity to an existing highway, that we have to look at adding that capacity as a tolled express lane. It doesn't have to be, so if we look at it, it doesn't make any sense, then we won't move forward and do it if the traffic's not high enough, or for some reason, I can't think of a reason. I think it was just if the funding's not there, we just won't add it, or the traffic's not there for some reason, like it's in the middle of nowhere, we probably just won't do it. We'll just add the capacity. But if it's a highly congested corridor and we're low on funding and we think we can bond or borrow and use that added capacity to by tolling and raise some revenue to kind of bond against that future revenue, we'll most likely do that. So the Colorado High Performance Transportation Enterprise, or HPT, exists to make Coloradans' commutes better. We're required under statute to aggressively pursue, and actually that's in statute, to pursue innovative means of more efficiently financing transportation projects, which is through P3s, operating concession agreements, user fee-based project financing, which is just tolls. So on I-25, that's just like, for instance, I-25 North from 36 to 120th, or the Mountain Express Lane, and annual performance payment agreements. As Jan was saying, we're an enterprise under the Colorado Constitution, so we 10% of the funds we earn can come from the state. The other 90% we have to raise ourselves, and that's through toll revenue. We are not the tail that wags the dog at CDOT, though. CDOT decides the project and the budget. CDOT asks HPT to analyze and explore innovative delivery options, and if there's a there, they provide final approval, and we can then go ahead and finance the or a portion of the project.
Is that CDOT through the
Commission, through the Project Management Office. So CDOT kind of decides, it bubbles up. So the Project Management Office, we have the 10-year development plan. If there's a gap in funding, they might say, like on I-25 South, they might say, HPT, go take a look at this and see if there's an option to raise funding to fill the gap. And that's what we're doing right now on that project. So you'll see these kind of signs, these signs along in the Denver Metro, the express lanes, and you'll see like I-25 express lanes, 36 express lanes. They're about providing choice to the drivers. They've proven to reduce delay on most seriously congested corridors. We use toll pricing to manage congestion, so toll prices will go up depending on the time of day to manage congestion. So as there's more congestion in the corridor, we'll raise toll prices in order to keep a reliable travel time. And to keep federal highways requires us to at least maintain 45 miles an hour in the lanes. We shoot for 55, so we price it to keep cars almost out of the lane so we can keep a free flow in the lanes. We promote transit and carpooling where viable, like on 36, I-25. But on the Mountain Express lane, the average driver in the mountains coming down from the ski areas is over 3, so there's no sense to have an HOV exemption on that corridor. C470, actually, the funding was so tight on that corridor, the locals actually asked us not to have HOV on that corridor so we could make the project happen. It closed a $40 million gap on that project. So when C470 opens, there will be no HOV exemption on the corridor. And we'll always offer a free general purpose lane option. So we're not going to go out there and toll the whole highway. So here's the express lanes region-wide in the Denver metro area. And I'll kind of walk through each project a little bit more in detail as we go on. But 36 was our first project. It was actually our first public-private partnership as well. There's a 50-year concession on it with a group called Plenary Roads Denver. Then we had I-25 north from 36 to 120th. And coming soon, we're actually, C470 is under construction. We also have the Mountain Express lane that goes eastbound from Empire Junction to the Twin Tunnels, or the Veterans Memorial Tunnel. Coming soon, C470, which is under construction, I-25 north from Johnstown to Fort Collins. That's RFPs out on the street right now. That should be under construction soon as well. From 120th to E470, that's under construction as well. That should be open for tolling in 2019 at the same time as C470, and then we have the Central 70 project as well. So the express lanes deliver operational improvements as well to the whole corridor. So everyone sees the benefits. So benefits include reduced travel time, especially in the tolled express lane. So if you're paying for you're paying for travel time reliability, and most people pay for it and the value of time. So if you don't use it all the time, studies have shown people don't use it all the time, but you can make a meeting on time, you're going to be late picking up your child from daycare, things like that, then people will hop in. And we've seen faster, more consistent speeds along all of our express lanes and general purpose lanes on all of our projects. So talk about a little bit about the 36 project more in depth now. When I started the HPT in late 2011, CDOT had just closed on a $54 million TIFIA loan, which is an advantageous loan program that the Federal Highway US DOT has. So they give you the first 5 years for free. You don't have to pay anything. And then you have really advantageous interest rates. So they'll be a subordinate to like bonds if you have bonds on the project as well. So we had that originally when they had the EA signed back in 2009. They just had funding from 36 to Sheridan. The $54 million TIFIA loan got them up to Wadsworth, and that was a CDOT project. And then we did a value for money study, which is what we kind of do when CDOT asks us to study the project and say, does this make sense to do as a P3? Came out that it did, and we procured it as a 50-year concession, and an operator has taken all the toll risk on it. So CDOT has none of the risk. So if the tolls don't cover their debt service, that's on them, that's not on the state. So it's actually a pretty good deal for the state of Colorado. They perform all operations and maintenance on the corridor. They're responsible to cover the costs in the express lanes, cover the costs of maintenance of the toll equipment, and we pay for the general purpose lane maintenance. And CDOT was able to move maintenance workers to areas that needed it, and Plenary takes care of everything on the corridor. The mobility choices on the corridor include transit. So RTD put up, as you'll see on the slide, it put up $124 million on the project. So they get priority in the express lanes. Riders ride for free. There's free HOV carpool. So if you have 3 people in your car, you ride for free. We have a switchable transponder. Motorcycles ride for free without a pass at all. And there's a bikeway that goes to the whole corridor down into Denver. And toll prices are varied on time of day, so obviously at peak periods, they're going to be higher than they are during like early in the morning, like 5 o'clock, and then at 9 o'clock they'll start going back down, and they'll start going back up again when people are going home.
Just a quick question with regards to the tolls. Do those are they an end game, or is that like forever? Lane is a toll road forever, or when it's paid for, when the toll ends?
That's a good question. I would say it's a toll lane forever because it's mostly like it will always provide travel time reliability. And I think that's a goal of CDOT and HPTs to always have that reliable travel trip time. Some states are just saying, even if we don't think we need it, we're going to put in an toll express lane because there's always that option for people in case they need to get somewhere on time and in case there's a traffic jam or something like that. So
the Boulder, that's why it's called Boulder Turnpike, if you all remember, it was originally a toll road, which is the same one we're here. But it was designed so as soon as the tolls paid off the road, then the toll went away. And that's what we're sort of familiar with here, is that approach. But this is a little different approach, and the tolls will continue. There's no plan to end the tolls. They'll always keep that lane open and running smoothly through the corridor.
So there's really a skew towards people that can afford to pay tolls.
We found that all people have used the tolls. We've done surveys. They're really not Lexus lanes. They're Fords, Toyotas. We find that it's a whole broad spectrum of incomes use it, and they use it for late to pick up. They're going to be late to pick up kids from daycare, or they have a meeting to make. They have to be home at a certain time. things like that. They'll use the express lanes for those reasons. They won't use them all the time, but they'll use them intermittently just to make sure they get someplace on time.
My sister lives out in Broomfield, and she always gives me a hard time for that very reason. She always said, well, only people can afford it who use it. But the truth is, and statistics have really proven, that it takes the burden off of the general lanes and moves it into this, so that all lanes benefit from this. So the more people you get there, the better it is for all the people in the other lanes. So it really is a win-win for everybody. I'm convinced of that after seeing some of the statistics.
It'd be a little easier to swallow if it had a sunshine law on it. You know, like, what's it
Original
paid
did.
for?
The original did, but no, yeah.
I mean, like, the project, we finished the project 20 years earlier than it was slated. I think DRCOG it was slated on the DRCOG log range plan, the phase 2 portion to be done in 2035. And as you can see, the graphic down at the bottom, between 2011 and 2015, general purpose lanes are almost 30% faster in the morning and 20% faster in the afternoon. And, you know, it's a national model for how to get these large projects done. The whole 36 corridor came together, and you know, they put together $16 million plus DRCOG money, plus RTD money, the Tiger Grant, the $10 million, the TIFIA loan, and they kind of cobbled together all this funding and got this project done. So it's kind of, C470 saw how they did it, the C470 coalition saw how they did it on 36, and I think they formed the same kind of coalition as 36 did, and I think I-25 saw the I-25 to Johnstown to Fort Collins. They formed their own coalition as well, and I mean they're out there. They're lobbying. They're hitting state legislators. They're talking to us all the time, and like I-25 South has just formed their coalition as well. So I think that model has worked. I think the 36 model has worked, and I think locals have seen that and are starting to do that for their own projects. The I-70 Mountain Express Lane project, CDOT put up almost $47.5 million. We got a Bank of America loan, construction loan, for almost $25 million. That's from Empire Junction to the Twin Tunnels. It's only tolled on, it's not open all the time. When it's low traffic, it's a shoulder, and we open up the shoulder on Friday, Saturday, Sundays, and as I'll show you in a couple slides how well it's working. Like, as I said, no HOV, no trucks, trailers. The board passed a resolution a while ago allowing for us to set tolls between $3 and $30, depending on traffic. We've never got that high. The tolls range between $6 and $8. And we're kind of testing it right now to see where that pinch point is, like where people start getting out of the lane. And that's usually just around $8 for the whole trip. And then, so here's how it looked back on Martin Luther King Day in 2014 compared to Martin Luther King Day. I think that's just our December 20. So that's kind of a range of time over between 2014 and 2015. And you can see, I mean, red is crawling, not moving at all, and yellow, I think, is 30 to 35 miles an hour. It's really helped a lot. I mean, you could sit between Empire and the tunnels for 3 hours, and now we're seeing almost free flow speeds. You'll see a 15, 20 mile an hour difference between speeds, but it's really helped operationally on the corridor by having that lane. And this is kind of this is over the. Unfortunately, this is INREX data. It's kind of like using Bluetooth and microwave travel time data from the corridor. And unfortunately, they can't take it just for one certain day, but this is across Sundays for the 2014 and Sundays on 2017. And you can see speeds have dramatically reduced on the corridor itself. This is from across the whole corridor, including the express lane. So I-25 North, we got to put that together. There's the $50 million Tiger Grant, $32 million from the feds, and the locals put up money, and CDOT put up some money as well, from 36 to 120th. It's the same kind of setup as 36, except that 36 you're told between every single exit. This, we've set it up so it's one toll rate through the whole corridor to encourage through trips, so not to prevent weaving in and out of the express lane. And as you can see, speeds of really going northbound on I-25 has really helped. The express lanes have actually helped the general purpose lanes as well, and the southbound. Express lanes coming soon, as I said, from 120th to E470. We got another bank loan from Bank of America for $22 million that's backed by the toll revenue. So we have to pay that back to Bank of America using the toll revenue. Similar structure, mobility and tolling structure as US 36, on I-25 south from 136 to 120th. And same thing from Johnstown to Fort Collins. It's going to look the exact same. But I think the big thing to mention there is that how much the locals put up on that. $25 million. A lot, even the smaller communities up north put up a lot of money, really dug deep into their sales tax revenue and put up a lot of money for that project. And we'll put up to about $50 million loan, depending on what our traffic and revenue study shows up there. We just closed on the C470 Express Lanes project a couple of weeks ago, $107 million TIFIA loan, $162 million in toll revenue back bonds. That was our first bond deal. We were 15 times oversubscribed. The market out there is really hungry for toll revenue bonds. Douglas County and the locals put up $10 million for that, and CDOT put up $40 million actually. That's the wrong number. $40 million in ramp funds. So this is toll only, as I said, no HOV exemptions, no carpooling. Motorcycles do go for free. That's a state statute. And then toll rates are by time of day, and they're by zones. So there'll be 3 zones going westbound from I-25 to Wadsworth, and 2 zones going from Wadsworth to I-25. And that's to encourage through trips so there's not a lot of weaving in and out of the lanes. And then our big project right now is Central 70. That's also a public-private partnership that we're procuring right now. It's a $1.2 billion project that's going to lower I-70 from I-25 to about a little past Colorado Boulevard, but it will it'll reconstruct I-70 from the whole way out to about 225. And that's what we're up to and how we work, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And
Start with Aubrey.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
Once the toll lane is paid for, is there information on where the toll revenue then?
So that's a good question. In our statute, it says that any toll revenue has to be spent on, excess toll revenue has to be spent on an integrated transportation system. And we read that to mean either has to be spent on the corridor or not too far off the corridor. So like on 36, we came to an agreement with the locals on 36 that any excess toll revenue, once plenary hits its internal rate of return, that it gets spent on transit, last mile things, bikeway, things like that. And we're working with Adams County on I-25 North to talking to them about something similar. But we've set up the board has actually set up a policy, once we get excess revenue back in, how we spend that.
So your group gets to sort of dictate.
Well, on operational, we'll spend on operational things, improving the lane, improving the toll equipment, things like that.
And then the other question was, so like for instance on C470, the decision not to reward carpooling, what kind of criteria helped you come to that decision? That seemed a little odd to me, that one didn't include.
Yeah, it was a tough decision. It was a hard decision for the board and for the commission, because the commission sets HOV policy. It was mainly, one, there's not, the RTD doesn't run buses down there. It's not inherently not a carpooling kind of corridor. Most people are solo drivers. But there's, there's criteria. So basically, it's just weighted by the financing and by the locals, and by DRCOG. So,
Jen had her,
I have a question, because and I, granted now at this stage, I don't have to go up on Friday night and come back on Sunday afternoon, I can dodge for a little bit now, but, were you saying you use the shoulder as the express lane? On I-70.
on I-70. So you'll notice
I
it.
know what I'm going, I'm thinking there are some times where the shoulder, had a lot of action that had to do with accidents, not speed. And I'm
So
wondering,
we'll shut it down if there's an accident. The police will actually be given the police and state patrol, fire department, the authority to shut it down if there's an accident. So we have the cameras along the corridor, and they're constantly monitoring it. They'll shut it down immediately if there's an accident, because they'll shove it over into the express lane, and then it will act as a shoulder. And I think we had a board presentation last month about how well it's working, and there was only about 3 incidents in the lane itself. I think there was maybe a dozen incidents that kind of straddled the lane, and then there's more incidents outside the lane, but that's actually decreasing because of the flow. You're actually seeing more flow through the corridor. So you're actually seeing that's actually increased safety for motorists along that corridor coming down I-70.
just to clarify, so let's say when the shoulder goes down, which is your express lane, does the express lane move over?
No,
Okay, it's just,
this is gone.
careful, go down
This is
the road,
gone.
yeah.
We've just lost that revenue.
Or hurt.
Sharon?
Okay, how are you assessing the driver?
How many drivers? So H for HOV?
Okay, no, like I take E470 constantly. Okay, then that comes out of my credit card.
So you have the little sticker, Express Toll. There's E470 offers the Express Toll stickers, which is free. Or if you have, you're going to be, on 36 or I-25, and you're going to have more than 3 people in your car, we have a switchable transponder.
Okay.
That's cost $15. If you're going to know you're going to be we call it an HOV purist, and you're going to be HOV all the time, you can get it for free. But if you don't use it within 6 months, or you use it in toll mode ever, we'll charge you the money for it.
But is that coming out of your credit card? Or
Yeah,
how's
well, you
that?
could tie a credit card to it, or you can get a bill.
All right, so either one. Okay.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Okay, Kevin?
Jan, how is your board populated? And you have one from every district and
It's
that kind of
similar to
thing?
the Transportation Commission districts. We actually have some Transportation Commissioners that sit on the board, but it's designed to be all over the state is covered by board members.
Yeah.
And, when I first got there, one of my thoughts was, wow, this is great, but they're all in Denver. What about the rest of us? But the board does have members from all across the state, and we are looking at projects across the state, including I-25 North.
And are you like direct reports to the commission, or are you kind of just a whole separate board that's all?
Yep,
We're
separate
really
board.
separate.
You're really an
but
enterprise
we-
board, huh?
But we do have a pretty close relationship, obviously, with the transportation commissioners. In some cases, they've helped us with funding some projects, and so we work closely with them, but we are a separate entity from the Transportation Commission.
I'm not an economist, but you talked about raising the tolls. Raising the tolls when it's really congested, seems like you're making more money, but you're not actually using the toll road or the toll lane as much. So you're using it less, raising more money. When the economist in me, which isn't very much, says if I'm trying to reduce the congestion on the other 3 or 4 lanes or whatever, I'd like to have more people out there in that lane. How does that? What am I missing?
So in these traffic and revenue studies that we do are pretty in-depth, and they come up with these curves. We price for throughput. We don't price for raising revenue. So that's something that's our goal. However,
People accuse you of that, though.
yeah, but we have to price it in such a way that FHWA can take the lane away from us, and which in some cases can hurt if we have a loan against it or we have a public-private partnership. So we have to maintain, we have, by statute, to maintain at least 45 miles an hour.
And how does this differ from privatization? And I've seen other road projects that are really private roads.
It's not private at all. So, like on 36, it's still our road. It's still CDOT.
The lender can't come and say, I want my road back. I'm going to close this road.
No.
Pay me, that kind of stuff.
They could, Plenary can go bankrupt, but then we renegotiate, and it's most likely always a better deal for the state if we got it back. Right now, they're hitting projections. They're raising toll rates for the first time in 2 years next month. They're kind of actually lowering rates at some times of the day and raising in others. So
That's really a unique one, the US 36, and it was the first one that was really done, because the Plenary Roads actually built the road. They'll maintain the road for 50 years. There's certain standards they have to reach. For example, snow plowing, they have to meet certain standards for snow plowing or they're fined. But for 50 years, they'll be maintaining the road and managing it all, and they built the road as part of this project. But we still own the road. Still our road.
yep.
Jan, what's on the books for Colorado Springs and El Paso County region relative to projects that you guys are looking at? I'm thinking of, the GAP project, the GAP 2 project between I-25 and Highway 83 on Powers. Anything like those kinds of things?
There really hasn't been much, and Nick maybe could tell me, but the board hasn't been notified of any local projects other than I-25 north to Castle Rock that they're really involved in. And I think it's probably partially volume, even though we know how busy it is up there, but I'm not sure the volume would warrant the kind of financing that goes on here for these kinds of projects. But Nick might know more than I do.
Yeah, we did. So yesterday we had interviews with traffic and revenue teams to study C-470 through Colorado Springs, and most importantly, just in the Gap region as well, from Monument to Colorado Springs. So we're going to be studying that to see if it's feasible for us to help out by funding for that section. But there really hasn't been anything down here in the Springs that we've had the ability to look at yet, or the locals. We usually like the locals or the region, the CDOT region, to come to us and say, can you help out? Can you look at this project? We don't actively kind of go, like as I said earlier, we're not the tail wagging the dog.
One of the things I've brought up, and because we haven't had any projects, and even the people west of Denver have had projects because of this I-70 West project, is looking at other forms of transportation, not just roads, that maybe that is something that we could consider down the road of whether it's a train or even increasing the use of Mustang. Mustang's right now really a commuter bus that takes you to Denver. If you want to go up on a weekend and go to a show and have dinner and whatever, Mustang isn't available. So looking at some of those options that maybe would be some ways that we could get more involved with.
Okay, Jen, one more.
And I've been in different states where it's done differently, but how do, granted, we get a lot of visitors, which is great for tourism. How do you deal with the rental car stuff?
So, yeah, rental cars, they'll get tolled through E-470 as well. And then, so you, as a the rentee of the car, you'll get charged the toll, plus the rental car companies usually charge you a surcharge on top of that as well to process it. So depending on the car company, it could be quite a bit. So Hertz, Enterprise, they all charge quite a bit. Yeah.
It's especially helpful if you didn't turn on or open up the little thing when you hit the toll road.
Yeah.
That gets interesting too.
Yeah, it's much cheaper if you have one of the transponders in your car.
That's right.
Instead of license plates. We took a tour of the company that does the tolling, and they have a whole room, bigger than this, filled with people who do nothing all day but look at license plates. Because all the people who don't have transponders, they take pictures of your license plates, and then they have to verify that. So they really encourage people to get those transponders, and it's cheaper for that reason.
Yeah, it is.
doesn't
It is
cost
cheaper.
anybody
Mhm.
to have to,
It's on E470. Mm-hmm.
build together.
Well, let me, Tamara, you have last question.
Last question. So to make the funding source, I think that's a great idea to supplement some of the transportation projects. I think that's great. I guess maybe this question more is for you, Mark, or Region 2, is why is it that the Southern Colorado hasn't utilized this funding source for some of the big projects that we have done?
I knew that was coming. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, Mark Andrew with CDOT. No, it's a terrific question. One of the things, the strategies we've looked at for I-25 through Colorado Springs is looking at ramp metering first and seeing what that will do. And it's part of our Tier 1 project to look at ramp metering. In fact, we've just put out a request for proposal to hire a consultant to take that a step further and maybe look at 10 locations on not only improving some of the ramps, but also extending the ramps and putting more capacity on the ramps, along with that ramp metering system. And so we'll see what we can do with that. Eventually, our environmental document calls for 8 lanes through Colorado Springs, and we envisioned those inside lanes, or those lane 7 and 8, to be either an HOV lane or it could be an express lane. So, eventually I think we're going to get there on I-25. It will be feasible where it makes sense to look at that option. And it may be that we're close now, but if we do a ramp metering system for much cheaper that's much more effective, there's no point in tolling it yet. So, and then we've looked at powers in the past. The only possibility was powers from 83 up to I-25 that got maybe a lukewarm response, almost like a yellow light if that was the case. And then recently they've looked at it again and said, really, there's too many alternate routes and not enough congestion or growth yet for North Powers. So we did look at Central Powers. There right now, unless you build it with 5-mile increments where you could toll within 5-mile increments, there's really no options on Powers. Powers is more of a destination type corridor where a toll necessarily wouldn't be used yet because you just don't have those long trips on Powers. People want to get off.
To Platte,
Right.
that might work.
Right.
Barnes to North Carolina,
Right.
you're not going to do that.
Right. And even then, we just don't have the congestion yet on power. So it comes up in conversations every once in a while, and I think when the time comes, we'll look at that option. When we do the widening, and we're designing it right now from Circle down to South Academy on I-25, we have to look at tolling. But if that's a 2-mile section, likely it's probably not going to be conducive to tolling. But if we go further south with a bigger widening project, I suppose it's possible. But we'll look at that as part of our design to see if that's an option.
Okay.
I
Thank you,
think
Mark.
one thing that's important there to remember is the reason you would want to do this, like we did with US 36, is it allowed them to get that project done 20 years before it was on the schedule. So all these projects have been listed and are on a priority list, but if you want one done sooner, this is one way to move forward and get it done ahead of time.
Well, this is, first of all, thank you, Jan, and thank you, Nick, for your time with us today. Having recently traveled on I-25, I don't do it often enough to have a totally informed opinion, but it struck me that it has to be at least 4 lanes on each side, an 8-lane structure. Otherwise, we're building for about 2008, 2009 capacity. And this sounds like something that might be a real way to address it, with maybe 3 general lanes and an express lane that might all fit together. And so my 8 lanes would be, the dream would come true. Thank you again both very much. This has been very helpful and enlightening, and I think fits very well with our next topic. As I'm getting head nods from the visitors. Thank you.
Hey, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe our victim is Mandy Wharton.
That is me.
Does Ken, do you want to introduce her or no? Sure. Okay.
These last 2 people.
Because I've got your name
I
in
am
the memo.
down for Friday morning.
Yeah. I'm the guy that wrote the memo. I'm Ken Prather, PPACG Transportation Planner. I'll introduce Mandy Wharton, who is the Senior Project Manager for the I-25 South PEL. CDOT calls it South. We consider it North. But CDOT has a different project further up north that they call I-25 North. So this is the I-25 South PEL. Mandy?
And we do actually try and call it the Colorado Springs-Denver connection to avoid all of the souths and norths, because depends on where your frame of reference is, and Denver's not always the center of the universe. So,
Really?
as you all know, so we started this planning environmental linkage study about in the late summer of last year, and a lot has changed over that time. So I'm just going to go through a general background. Feel free to ask questions along the way if you have them, or we could take questions at the end. I am open to either one. So as you all know, I-25 is an extremely important corridor to Colorado. I-70 gets a lot of attention, certainly is an important corridor as well, but I-25 really is linking all of our major population centers and all of our business centers. It's obviously critical to this region as well, not just for your connections to Denver, but to the population, the labor market, the recreation that's coming in through the Denver market as well. We do know that there's some near-term relief that's going to be needed, and that we need to also have a longer-term vision. So it is important. Important for us to keep that in mind as we're moving through. So we have a slightly different way that we're looking at the corridor. So there's been a lot of focus on the gap, but I'm going to explain kind of why we're looking beyond that as well. So what a planning and environmental linkage study is, for those of you that are not familiar with it, which is a lot of people probably. I don't know that there's been that many done in the region. There's one going on right now on US 24 East. But generally it's something that's fairly new to CDOT, and it's generally used to define projects and to set a vision before there's really any funding available, and to really determine the costs and the funding and financing and delivery options for future projects when we don't necessarily know what the solution is or what it's going to cost. It also has been a really effective way of engaging with corridor communities and starting to build some partnerships. So things like the I-25 Coalition that recently formed, which is a group of elected officials primarily at the local level from both El Paso and Douglas counties to really advocate for the corridor. That's often an outcome of these early planning studies, and that has come to fruition in this one as well. And it allows us to identify some significant environmental constraints or policy constraints or financial constraints moving forward, so that we can really define projects that we can get through to an efficient construction. There we go. So study limits are from the end of your I-25 North project at Monument up to C-470. The operational study obviously extends farther than that. The real travel demand is between those two big urban areas, so it's really a broader travel market. So it's the Colorado Springs, El Paso County, and even beyond into El Paso and into Pueblo and other areas farther south, and then north into Denver, and then farther north beyond that. So we've divided the corridor into 3 basic segments. Segment 1 has really gotten the most focus, and that's the southernmost segment, which is referred to as the Gap. That's the 4-lane section in between Colorado Springs or Monument and Castle Rock. Then moving north into Castle Rock, the kind of main street through Castle Rock on I-25 is segment 2. And that's going from the end of the Gap up to Castle Pines, which is sort of the end of the Castle Rock development.
And then moving into segment 3, which is really that commuter Denver area into the Denver South Tech Center area. So as you're going through that, you're moving from rural to more urban areas. You're generally picking up more traffic volumes. The highest traffic volumes are in that last segment, in segment 3. It also has the most capacity. So we've got more lanes in that area, and they're decreasing as you're coming down farther. And your populations are increasing as you're moving through the corridor as well. So why are improvements needed? Probably all of you have driven this and you have experienced all of these issues. We've got pretty significant safety, reliability, and mobility issues along the corridor. And what we mean by safety is that there's a high number of crashes. We have about 3 a day. I was late today because there was one at Monument on my way down. And not only does that present challenges for the crash itself, but there's a lot of secondary crashes. It's difficult to move crashes out of the roadway. That causes those second problems of reliability and mobility. And about half of the travel delays, particularly through the gap area where there aren't alternate roads or frontage roads, where you're just kind of stuck in that area, the delays there are more than half of them due to those types of incidents, crashes, events, things that are not recurring congestion type issues. So that really has a big effect on reliability. The non-recurring congestion is the unpredictable thing. So some days it might be that you can travel through the corridor in 45 minutes, and some days it may be 4 hours. And not knowing which one of those you're going to end up on, and especially if you check, early on and you get in the middle of the gap area and all of a sudden you're stuck, that is very frustrating to travelers. And I think that creates what FHWA, Federal Highway, has really been characterizing across the nation as reliability issues, that people remember the worst times and think that that is the average. And so those kind of frustrating periods where you don't have a reliable trip is particularly frustrating to drivers. And then we have a number of mobility challenges in the corridor. We have truck operations, we have steep grades, we've got narrow shoulders, we've got limited amount of alternate modes, so we have mostly vehicular traffic. We have some transit, but there's certainly been a lot of interest in additional types of travel mode, a lot of interest in transit in particular. And then just some of the other physical deficiencies in the corridor of not being able to move out of disabled vehicles out of traffic really does hamper mobility. So we've really focused, and this is largely a result of the pressure from local officials, a lot of them in this region in particular, really, and this has been a focus really up at the governor's level. It was part of commitment from the governor to do something to this stretch of highway back in his second term, and so that has really been a focus for a long time. And it's 18 miles basically of a two-lane roadway between two much larger sections of roadway, and the recent improvements in the Colorado Springs area, I think, have brought more traffic into that gap area and really exacerbated those delays and problems that we're seeing there. So we have committed, and CDOT committed in January to advance a project through into design to be ready for construction as soon as possible. And we determined that as soon as possible was mid-2019. So pending funding being identified, we will have a project that is shovel-ready basically by the middle of 2019. It would take about 2 years to 2.5 years to construct, so it could be open to traffic by the end of 2021, which for some of you that are more familiar with transportation projects, that would be the fastest that CDOT has ever deployed a project in its history. So it's really quite accelerated. It seems like a long time, but it is a very long corridor. It is a complicated project, and there's a lot of elements involved. So it's a pretty aggressive schedule, and so far we're on that schedule to meet that. The funding discussion aside, I'll get to that a little bit. So the planning environmental linkage study is covering the entire corridor. So that is developing that ultimate plan and the vision for whether I-25 needs to be 4 lanes or 6 lanes or 10 lanes, or whether it includes a transit element, whether it is, has other features. That is kind of our broader vision. That'll be done by spring. And then we're advancing roadway design and an environmental assessment for the gap area, which is that 18 miles. And that project we're looking at, again, having that ready for construction by mid-2019. Funding, this was the commitment in January was to get a project ready for construction, but recognizing that CDOT did not have the funds to actually go to construction, there was an agreement between Federal Highway and CDOT to accelerate this project without construction, which is also something that is not typically done. One of the problems that Federal Highway had been noticing across the country, and in Colorado in particular, is we had planned and designed a lot of projects that the state couldn't afford to build. And by the time funding became available, sometimes designs were not up to date. The current project for Colorado Springs, of I-25 through Colorado Springs, was based on 2025 traffic numbers. So that kind of gives you an idea. We're finishing the last phases of that now. And so when projects take a really long time pending not having funding, they can't adapt as well to future changes. So in general, we're trying not to do detailed planning. We would like to have some vision. We'd like to have an implementation plan, but not the detailed planning without funding. In this particular case, because it was such a high priority and the locals, at that time, local, state, and federal money seemed to be very possible, that this, for a really high priority project like I-25, that we went ahead and made an exception to advance this project to really accelerate it and get it ready for construction. On the state level, there was, out of the state legislature, House Bill 267, which provided some potential financing for some of the projects on a high priority list. I-25 was one of those projects. How exactly that money will be distributed is still to be determined. And I think there's a potential that CDOT's policy director is going to be coming to give an update on the funding situation. So I won't get into the details of that. I'm not an expert on those. But as far as what we know right now, it's not a secure funding source, but we think that there's probably some money that's coming out of that, but probably not enough to fund the entire project. The I-25 Gap Coalition I mentioned before did also form to try and provide that local match. As Nick had mentioned, that is a really attractive way to fund projects. The more local money there is, the more partnerships there are, the more favorable those are on almost any funding criteria. So the more money that you can generate at the local level, the more likely is that your project moves to the top of the list. So that is one of the main focuses of the GAP Coalition. And they are meeting tomorrow, and they meet up in Douglas County. So those meetings are open if anybody's interested in attending those or getting updates from them. And we do think that the project would likely fare well for federal funds if there is some sort of a federal infrastructure package. At this point, we don't know if there's going to be or what the criteria might be, but just based on the number of people that it serves and the type of facility that it is, it seems like I-25 would likely be a good candidate regardless of what those criteria are. We do have a lot of people involved in the project. So we have at the CDOT level an executive oversight committee that is chaired by the deputy executive director, and it includes CDOT leadership primarily. We have a project management team, which is the kind of nuts and bolts of the planning and the technical work, advancing the project through, and that's CDOT and Federal Highway is really involved in that as well. We have a technical working group, which is planners, engineers, scientists across the corridor communities and really across the state and even some federal agencies, all participating to kind of help us on specific issues as we go through the process of determining what makes sense for the corridor. And then we have a steering committee, which is mostly elected officials. It was formed before the coalition was formed, and it's different than the coalition because it includes not just local elected officials, but also state representatives as well as federal representatives. And again, the profile of this project, we do have representation from the federal delegation as well as all of the state reps, and particularly in this region. We have some stakeholder focus groups, so we have kind of a speaking bureau of if there's people that you think are interested in the project that would be interested in having a presentation or finding out more about the project. We are doing some of those focus groups, and then we do also have public meetings. We have 4 sets of public meetings planned. We've held 2 of them, and we're doing them on both ends of the corridor. So the next ones are going to be in this region September 26th at the Library 21C. And then there's been a number of other CDOT-wide events where the project has been has been featured. There's Facebook Live, which is something that CDOT's doing every couple months. Telephone town halls, again, sort of a CDOT-wide. We will also be doing telephone town halls specific to this project in the September timeframe. And those are nice because they reach a lot of people. So the telephone town hall that CDOT did for this region's projects, which was a couple weeks ago, had almost 8,000 people call in at the height. So not all of them stayed on the entire time, but it's certainly a way to, getting a few hundred people to a public meeting, which we have had for this project, is a huge turnout. 8,000 people is certainly a lot easier way to reach people. We're also doing, special events as they come up as well. So any suggestions that you have on ways that we could better coordinate with community groups, we are certainly open to that. And that was the end of formal presentation.
Okay, let me start the questions. Just so I understand where we are with a couple of these. My impression is that segment 2 in the study, the segment in Castle Rock to Castle Pines, that looks like that's done. Am I right or wrong, or is there more work still to be done up there?
Well, there's a couple. We're looking at that segment is really critical because it becomes the new gap really because it's in between the other two segments. So right now there is not a plan to expand that at all, but whatever we do, for instance, if we added 4 lanes to the gap, there's only 3 lanes, receiving lanes in Castle Rock. There's the same thing's true on the south. There's only 3 receiving lanes right now in the Colorado Springs area too. So how all of those pieces fit together is pretty important. And I know Castle Rock is very concerned about what that pressure means both for local and regional travel. So if you open up more regional capacity, what does that do to their local trips? And so that is an important segment that we don't have any plans to do construction on right now, but we will certainly be looking at how all of those fit in and making this early construction project compatible with that overall vision for what's going to happen in the future.
Now, is the construction that's currently going on in segment 3, is that part of your work, or is that stuff that was started before and you're looking beyond that?
Yeah, that was started as part of, it's I-25 South, because they're all called South, but there was a I-25 South US 85 EIS that was done in the early 2000s, and so that was based on 2030 traffic numbers. That was the last piece of that part of that project, which was sort of the T-Rex to Castle Rock area. And so it's called a lane balance because there were basically just that very short segment of about 2 miles where there was 3 lanes and some auxiliary lanes that didn't really connect as full lanes. So that was the last of the 4 lanes in that section, each direction.
Jen?
And I caught on something, and I didn't bring it down, because about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I had the same question, and then it was answered, and it didn't turn out to be exactly what I anticipated and told some of my constituents, was that one of the things we noticed when we drive back and forth Colorado Springs is the Greenland area is like crash central. But the last couple of times I've been through, and we use Waze to see where that jump's happening, but we noticed that what you referred to as it's a mobility reliability issue may not be a wreck. It's like something goes south.
Yeah, there's those weird
goes off the
curves.
road, or somebody
Yep.
doesn't take the turn correctly.
Yep.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, people slow down for a lot of reasons, and curves and trucks are definitely 2 of those things that cause that instability in the travel stream that do cause delays not related to wrecks.
And one of the things I asked about a couple of years ago was if there was somebody to assist or get a vehicle off the road quickly, it won't bunch up as much as it does. You won't have everybody coming Colorado Springs through Palmer Lake. But one of the things that I found out about down the road was that vehicle that is a state vehicle that helps people or has a tow truck or that kind of support is rare in that neck of the woods. And I'm going, well, that's the one neck of the woods of that stretch that could really benefit from having that type of support. Was there any discussion about doing that? Because I told a bunch of people that it existed, and so not to worry any longer, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh no, it's not there.
Yeah, do you want to, there's some plans on courtesy patrol, so.
Oh, right, and so Karen Rowe really challenged the team to say, look, are we looking at early action items that we should be looking at? And one of the early action items let's evaluate the courtesy patrol that we have and see, is it effective? Are we moving accidents off quickly? I know injury accidents are going to take more time. And then also with that, are we getting the patrols up there that we need with State Patrol? And I know that we have a contract with State Patrol to increase enforcement as well. So there is some attention going on as far as looking at early action items, not just in terms of operations or courtesy patrol, but also looking at maybe even variable speed limit signs, additional signing, looking at, some early action items that may be safety improvements outside of this bigger project that we want to be able to have ready to go in about 2 years. So there may be some early projects that we get some funding, some safety money that we can do some of these things. So the guardrail, for example, the cable rail, where you get stuck in the cable rail, you can't get out. We're looking at trying to look at an effective way to get vehicles out of that zone and on the frontage road safely, breaks in the cable rail, but do it in a way that it's monitored and it's controlled when we do relieve that congestion. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at. I can bring some of those to this board as they develop through this process and give you some more information.
Timing would be on actually implementing something, or some of those
Well, some of them they're going to implement right away. I mean, with fairly soon. I think we're going to look at the courtesy patrol and see is that effective? Is that working well? I've noticed, for example, through Colorado Springs that courtesy patrol, especially through Cimarron, has been more effective about clearing accidents than it has been. So I think there is some efforts going along just in terms of the whole I-25 corridor. We have a dedicated incident manager for I-25 that works for CDOT that it has close coordination with all the emergency personnel up and down the corridor to not only assist but also develop agreements. Look at options for early clearing and things that we can do to try to get the traffic moved off the road as quick as we can. Now, injury accidents, that's an investigation that sometimes takes a long time. So those are going to be, and we've been getting a lot of injury accidents. So nothing you can do about that. You're going to close the road if you get a fatality, for example. I did want to say, I just remember a couple other things. Early advanced VMS signs, we're looking at those to give motorists a better chance to use alternate routes if they can. For example, you don't want to be southbound and suddenly you hit the backup at Plum Creek. You really want to know, what is my travel time between Castle Rock and Colorado Springs at that point? So we have those travel time signs, but we're looking at maybe adding more of those in the right place where people can make better decisions. So
That would be helpful. Tamara, and then
Adding on to Ken's comment, on the PL study, were you able to identify what are key factors that are causing some of those accidents in Greenland? And that will help CDOT identify, which option on a more of an immediate, immediate solution until construction begins.
Yeah, that is what the characterization of what's happening out there right now took some time because this corridor actually behaves very much more like the mountain, especially the southern section behaves much more like the mountain corridor than it does like a typical interstate through Colorado Springs or through Denver, because it's rural. There really aren't any destinations there. It's actually got very similar weekend and weekday volumes, so a lot of the volumes are similar. The delays are much worse on the weekends, and they're worse at Friday southbound direction. And it's interesting because the volumes are fairly similar, but the delays are much worse. And so there's a lot of things that are going on in the southbound direction with the grades. There's a very slow, steady grade. Monument Hill is the high point of I-25 through Colorado. So, you're kind of slowly coming up that as you're coming out of Colorado Springs, and then, the same way coming out of Denver. So that creates a lot of issues for truck traffic, there's a lot of weather issues associated with Monument Hill. There's, visibility things. There are a lot of different factors that contribute to the safety and mobility issues, and it's not just a function of congestion.
So second part to my question, so during construction, when this happens, you have the railroad on the western limits of the project, will there be 2 lanes of traffic available during construction?
Yeah, that is a requirement for interstate. So, and actually, there's more space than it seems like is really there. So I don't think, we haven't really determined that that would be an issue to maintain 2 lanes of traffic and to be able to construct outside of live traffic.
Aubrey, and then Ellen.
Yeah, 2 hopefully quick questions. Can you attribute much to drivers not using the left lane as a passing lane and its enforcement of that?
Yeah, so there are, one thing is that's a function of 2 lanes. 2 lanes is not ideal for passing anyway, just because there's not a lot of maneuverability. Adding a 3rd lane, even beyond capacity, does a lot to provide that option for people to use the 3rd lane as a passing lane and not to just drive in the 3rd lane. And we certainly have gotten a lot of suggestions. We have been talking about some kind of ways that drivers can help themselves do better, and that certainly is one of the things that could be a message that comes out as a use the left lane for passing only. There's been some discussion about potentially doing and this could be another early action kind of project, would be slow moving vehicles to have some left lane minimum speeds. They wouldn't be specific to trucks, but it would be specific to being able to maintain, a reasonable speed.
It's a speed limit.
Yeah, and we do have that.
You have that in the lower part of Denver, don't you?
There are a number of places where we have minimum speeds. The mountains have a number of places where where it actually says it's advisory kind of things like trucks, the steep grades ahead, that kind of thing, but. There's a number of comments that we've gotten about speed that we're trying to figure out. Are there ways that we could do something with the existing 2 lanes as a way to make that traffic move better? And so I think some variable speed limits is one of the ideas. Some left lane minimum speeds is another idea. Some no passing zones could be potentially a place where that's another potential idea. We don't have. All of the we just have done our we don't have a lot of existing traffic data in the corridor, so CDOT only has 2 traffic counters in the corridor, one at Plum Creek and then one just south of Monument Hill. So we've just gotten new traffic numbers. We've got a lot of travel delay information from the INRIX data, so those graphs that Nick showed. We have a pretty good information about the delays, but not necessarily the volume. So now we're kind of equating volumes and delays and speeds and trying to figure out what would make sense as some initial actions based on more review of the data.
Ellen, sorry.
Second quick one. I hope I didn't miss this. At what point does this project go through assessment with HTEP? Is that what they go?
Oh, HPTE. They are doing a traffic and revenue study now. I don't know if you know more about that. There's a little bit of a wall between the financing side and the recommendation side intentionally so that we're not colored by those views. So you might know more about the traffic and
I'm
revenue
not
study.
quite on that other side, but I know, well, what I've been told is when they looked at it a couple of years ago, there really wasn't enough congestion to warrant tolling. And so what they didn't consider was the number of accidents or incidents. And so they're taking another look at it to say, hey, we are getting congestion. It is not just an incident issue. It's also a congestion issue now. So we've seen the traffic numbers jump up significantly in the last few years. And so they're going to take another look at it. They have to add capacity anyway, like the previous presentation. So it'll be a part of this study and recommendation in terms of funding. So if it does qualify for tolling, it'll be part of the package probably.
The plan right now is that the environmental assessment process would evaluate both options fully so that we would be making that decision through the National Environmental Policy Act process, and it would be based on actually how we think the corridor is going to operate. with the different lane assumptions based on an express lane or a general purpose lane. And this is probably a good, there's a whole variety of factors. Cost has been a focus of today's discussion, but there's a lot of other operational factors to why 3 lanes is a good idea and 3 lanes is better than 2 lanes, and why flexibility in a 3rd lane is better than being stuck with only one operating potential. So those are the kind of things that we will still look at, is really how to provide a better travel experience. And I'm very confident that it will be better than it is today. However, whatever decision we come up with.
Ellen?
Michelle has a question too.
You have one? Oh, I'm
I know
sorry.
we're constrained by time. I so appreciate you coming and sharing all this information. And in doing that, you've actually opened up a lot more questions, which is really great. It means the process works, and I'm grateful. Specifically, I would just, what you shared about the points that you all reviewed in your planning, and what you haven't shared, give me pause. You've touched on environmental versus safety. You mentioned Monument Hill as a safety factor, but you haven't mentioned that in this 18-mile stretch, that there are multiple climatic zones, and the original plan for I-25 is laid out in early 1950s, didn't address this kind of volume. They just couldn't see that far into the future. And I'm just wondering, at some point, does CDOT ever consider that maybe a Sausier cannot be made into the silk purse that we need now or in the next 30 years?
That is one of the things that Shaylin Bat likes to talk about, is that, we have a roadway designed in the 50s, constructed for 70s traffic, 60s pavement. There's a lot of things that are really outdated about this corridor, and so it is probably not that we're going to end up with being able to think 50 years into the future. But yeah, it's gotten a lot of attention because there is, it is a very old stretch of highway. It is outdated by the way we are connected.
There are those of us who drive it and love it. In the 70s, it was a dream. And since then, I can tell you as recently as last week that 18-mile stretch would be perfect as a Colorado state highway, but not as an interstate. And maybe we need to think about that particular section and how it ties in, and possibly changing the location. And I know that's nobody's favorite topic, but at some point, if we're talking about doing these changes with a vision for the long-term future, we may need to think about a significant change, if only for safety. But you can't have all the other bells and whistles we want without addressing safety first. Thank you.
And I don't know, this isn't just adding on to that comment. So safety is a significant, it is one of our key needs in the corridor. And we do think there are some things that we can do, localized things that we can do to make it safer, regardless of what happens with the capacity. And one of those things is in that 18-mile segment, which, so the highway was planned a long time ago and the land use was planned a long time ago. So that whole area, that 18-mile segment, is almost all in conservation easement. And it was very deliberate land use decisions to not have that area developed so that Colorado Springs and Denver didn't grow together to be one megapolis. And so that land use decision there means that there's really not a lot of destinations. There aren't any destinations really other than recreational destinations through that 18-mile segment. But one of the characteristics of that is because you've got open space on both sides, we have a lot of wildlife conflicts, way more than a typical interstate highway. So I'm about 50% more crashes related to reported animal vehicle collisions. So that's one of the key things that we're looking at for the highway in its current location, is to look at improving wildlife passage so that it reduces those conflicts, because that is both better for the environmental resources and the land uses there, but also for vehicle safety and for traveler safety.
I would just register one aspect of my comments again, climatic zones. There are multiple ones in this 18-mile stretch. They impact the safety of the route 7+ months of the year. I would just ask you all to give that serious consideration. It's no joke when you're driving. Thank you.
Okay, last question from Michelle.
So I think most of us realize that a lot of the problems, not a lot of our problems can be alleviated by drivers helping themselves, like you said. Some of that is people too slow in the left lanes, and even where there's 3 zones in the middle lanes or paralleling each other. Does CDOT communicate at all with the local law enforcement agencies and the state patrols about saying, could you guys ticket the idiots in the left lane that are, 20 miles?
That's my husband's favorite question. There's like nothing that drives him more crazy than a slow.
It's horrific in Colorado Springs, basically from here up to Woodman. There are literally 3 of them sitting right next to each other all the way up, doing 55.
Yeah, I followed one of them recently too.
I don't know if there's anything we can do.
Well, one of the problems in the gap, and we touched on this a little bit, but enforcement is really challenging. And you guys know that 2 state troopers were killed on the stretch of highway in the last 2 years, and it is because we don't really have enough room to move people over safely. So that not only is getting crashes out, it's also an enforcement problem because the safety, and it's a safety issue for maintenance workers as well. So for things like, preparing for weather conditions and getting, de-icing out, plowing, those kind of operations are really challenging to do because there is no room to maneuver. There aren't any alternate routes and there aren't really sufficient shoulders to move people over. So a lot of good ideas that really only work if you can enforce them are challenging in this corridor until we make some improvements to make enforcement easier and safer, because we don't want to put our workers at risk either. But yeah, I do think there's some opportunity to say, slow drivers stay right. They're definitely, and we have talked about that. Are there ways, we talked about the variable messaging, are there things that are more valuable to put on the corridor than watch for wildlife on road? And we think there are.
Well, Mandy, thank you, and Mark,
Thank you all.
thank you very much. It's one of the things that's impressed me in my term on this has been the challenges that people in positions like you face, particularly because I think the tempo of change, both technological and otherwise, is accelerating. I don't know how you can keep up. That was the point of my question, was there's work going on right now that you all are trying to work beyond that, which, for those of us that travel up there, contemplating the idea of dealing with road construction forever is not high on my desired list. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you both very much. Okay, action items. I think we have Kevin for a couple of steps here. And I've noted that we have been joined by Brian Vituli, and Victoria's hiding there back there in the way back, in case there are additional questions.
All right. Good afternoon. Kevin Reyes, Transportation Planner with PPACG. So we finally have a recommendation from the TIP Policy Task Force from a couple months ago. I was not here last month, so I'm not sure exactly what was discussed, but I'll quickly give us a quick rundown on how we got to this point today for those of you who have been involved with this so far. So just a little bit of history. This might be a little redundant for some of you, but the TIP Policy Task Force was established back in January of this year to address some concerns that our member entities have had about flexibility with funding, because we had a policy that was adopted by the board back in 2006 called the NOPE policy, which stands for Not One Penny Extra. And we've had this policy since 2006, and basically what it says is that if a project goes over budget, PPACG does not provide any additional funding for that project. It also says that the project sponsor cannot change the scope of work for a project. So they're on the hook for the full scope of work, and they are not allowed to receive any additional funds. So that policy has basically made it not very flexible for project sponsors when issues come up. So back in, I believe it was November of last year, we had 2 different policy recommendations to the board. The TAC recommended that we eliminate the note policy, and we recommend CDOT's cash management advanced construction policy, which was the policy I mentioned a few months ago, which basically allows us to reach into the future for future funds and use those for current funding, as well as allow project sponsors to change the scope of work. PPACG staff and the CAC both recommended that we continue using the existing note policy. And so since we had two conflicting recommendations, the board decided to table it for further discussion. So as I said in January, we decided to establish this TIP task force policy to basically try to address this and come up with a policy that we can all agree with. So we've been meeting since January, and I think we've come up with a good recommendation here. I'll quickly run through here. At the TIP policy task force meeting, the first one, we addressed a list of issues that we wanted to tackle. So these were some of the issues that project sponsors have encountered with having the note policy in place. So they have had steep increases in cost of projects in future years. They've had issues with the planning level estimate versus the design level estimate. There's a large time between submitting the project and the project actually getting funded, which introduces a lot of variables in terms of inflation and stuff like that. Sometimes they've found that the IGA process takes longer than anticipated and pushes things into future years. Some project sponsors have said that the descriptions in the TIP are too specific, which means project sponsors are on the hook for very specific things. And those are kind of the issues that we discussed. So we made a list of goals that we wanted to address. We said one of our first goal is to minimize and manage cost overruns. Second goal is efficient and timely use of federal funds. Third goal is provide flexibility for the use of federal funds within the laws allowable. The fourth goal is make the process easier for PPACG and local entities. And the last goal is meet federal and state requirements. So that's kind of how we got to this point today. And so I'm going to quickly go over what the policy recommendation is. I brought it to the TAC last month. They recommended it for approval. And we did a little bit of wordsmithing on it. The one that you have in your packet is the most current one. So I will read through that, and then we can go over any questions on it. So that is an attachment number 1 of your packet. So it comes in several parts. So I'll read through it and explain each part. The first part says the TIP policy task force recommends using a 4-year TIP with a call for projects that will be done every 2 years. Shortening the length of the TIP from 6 years, which is what the current TIP is, to 4 years will help project sponsors more accurately forecast the cost of their projects and thus help avoid potential cost overruns. So right now we have the 2017 to 2022 TIP. We're recommending that the next TIP also go just to 2022. We're not going to add additional years. We're going to only have it be 4 years. That will help, again, make it a little bit more predictable for the costs of a project. The second part of the policy says the TIP policy task force also recommends allowing project sponsors to address cost overruns by applying the following to the committees and the board of directors. So first thing is allow project sponsors to use local funds for their projects. Now this first part is no different than what we had with the NOPE policy. In the NOPE policy we said, we're not going to give you any additional federal funds, but since you're going to have a cost overrun, you have to use local funds. So that's part of what we had before. So we're saying you can do that now as part of addressing a cost overrun. Second part says allow project sponsors to use additional money from unanticipated sources and project reconciliation. So unanticipated sources could be CDOT. At the end of their fiscal year, they have a closeout, and they sometimes have additional money. So that could be an unanticipated source that could be used for a cost overrun. The third part says allow project sponsors to change the scope of work for a project. And here we have the caveat of changing the scope of work cannot entail changing the inherent functionality/utility of a project. So what that means is, for example, if you're building an interchange for $20 million and you have $1 million of that for landscaping, if you are experiencing a cost overrun, you can use that $1 million that would have been applied to the landscaping and use that for the interchange overrun. So that would not be changing the inherent use of that project, since you're designing it for the interchange and not for the landscaping. So that would be one example. We left this open-ended on purpose. There's obviously all kinds of different examples you could get into, but we thought this is a very case-by-case basis thing here, so we left it a little bit open-ended. And then the last part says allow project sponsors to cancel one of their own funded projects and use those funds for cost overruns on a different one of their own funded projects, with remaining funds returned to the regional pool. If a project is canceled, it cannot go onto the waiting list. The canceled project would be eligible for submission during the next call for projects. So let me just break this down here. So first part says, allow project sponsors to cancel one of their own funded projects and use those funds for cost overruns on a different one of their projects. So that's pretty self-explanatory. But the second part says, after they've addressed the cost overrun for their project, if there's an additional funds, that has to go back into the general pool. And then any other projects that are experiencing cost overruns from other project sponsors, those additional funds would be used for those projects as well. So up here I mentioned unanticipated sources. Well, this would be another unanticipated source. If one project sponsor cancels one of their own projects to pay for a cost overrun and then they still have additional money, well, then that money would apply to another project sponsor's cost overrun if they have one. So that's how that would work. And then the last part says if a project is canceled, it cannot go onto the waiting list. So the waiting list is the last part here. And basically, I think I explained this a few weeks ago. This is the same type of waiting list that DRCOG uses. And basically what it is they have established a list of projects and they put them in order based on how they were scored. And they decided that, okay, we don't have enough money for these projects to go into the tip, but if we do have additional money, we'll go and down the list, and if a project wants additional funds, we'll fund them if they want them. So, for example, if you have a project that's number 1 on the waiting list, scored the highest of all the projects, for $10 million, but you only have $1 million available, you can ask that project sponsor, hey, we have $1 million for your project. If you want, we can take you off the waiting list and put you on the tip. We'll give you $1 million of federal funds, but you are responsible for the remaining $9 million with local funds. And they can either just decide to say, yes, we want that, we'll put us in the tip, or they can say, no, we don't have the local match for that, go to the next project. So then the next project in the list would be eligible for those funds, and so on and so forth, until you finally get to a project that's willing to take that $1 million. So that's the final part that we're recommending is the establishing the waiting list. And I think, yeah, I think that's everything for this policy. There's several parts to it, but I think again, PPACG staff, we're feeling confident that this would help address the issues that the TAC has brought up, and it will still maintain a level of structure, and it will still keep things equitable amongst the project sponsors. So I personally feel confident in this policy we've established, and we had a good process going through with these TIP policy meetings. So at this point, I would recommend this for approval as well. But I'll take any questions you have.
I'm going to start. Could you just clarify something I think I heard you say? Make sure that I'm not misunderstanding you.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 projects.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is going to go over my estimate. That's my more important project, and so I'm ready to cancel project B and take money out of that, and anything that I don't use in that goes back into the regional pool, right?
That's correct.
But if Kevin has, this Kevin, not you, if Kevin Walker has a project that is going to go over, did you say that the money that I'm returning may now be used to help meet his overage?
That's correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the way we're proposing it to work is every quarter we go to the project sponsors and we say, okay, how are your projects coming along? Do you have any cost overruns? And at that point, that's the time where they would tell us if they do. And if they do, that's when we start discussing potential solutions. Can you first one, can you cover that with local funds? If not, do we have any additional funds from CDOT? If not, all right, well, let's start looking at canceling projects. And as you said, if you have you have 2 projects in the tip, and you cancel project B to pay for project A, then once you those remaining funds from project B, if there's any additional funds after addressing project A, those would go to Kevin's project if he had a project cost overrun. So the idea is to help those smaller entities that don't have multiple projects to cancel. So the bigger entities will have several projects in the tip, so they'll be able to cancel other ones to pay for other ones. but the smaller ones will only have one project. So if they can somehow get those cost overruns funded by another project sponsor's canceled project, then that's what we're trying to do there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
The reason I asked the question is that's different from what's been briefed previously.
Okay.
There's been no provision for those funds to be used against the unlisted funded projects that are not on my list. Okay? So I'm going to be penalized.
I'm sorry, I'm misunderstanding.
Well, up until now, I felt like we were implementing a variation on the NOPE policy that allowed for an individual agency or entity to manage their own projects.
Yeah.
And that when the money went back into the pool, that would go against the waiting list, not go against some other project. Now, Brian, is this a change?
No, it's just a,
Mr. King of the Tech.
good afternoon. Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs. It's just an evolution of meeting over the last 6 months. And, we started with a list of about 17 potential alternatives, and this is just something that came up later in the process, but we felt that it was a good way to address everybody's cost overruns. Because, when we're dealing with submitting projects in 2016 that are funded in 2022, it's very hard when you're doing planning level estimates to get those right on. So if somebody has a cost overrun for a project, it's likely that somebody else will too. So we wanted to take care of those that way. Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yeah, I understood it the other way also, and it's hard for me to picture this, but I have a sense that they're game playing. The whole point behind the NOPE policy was that there was game playing that occurred, and people finally got fed up with it and said, we're not going to do this anymore. So we're just going to implement this really strict, really difficult, stringent policy. Now what we're doing is trying to say, well, maybe that doesn't work in these kind of high inflationary kind of times where we've got extra resources. But now I kind of have a sense that how about if I cancel my project, I'll cancel that project, the money will go to your cost overrun, so who goes first in the cost overrun canceling process is the one that's going to start playing games with the person who's going second. And I like the whole idea of it just drops out, doesn't go to any other project in the list, it goes to projects that are not on the list, that were, the first project that didn't make it in the scoring gets shot at that $1 million, the second project, the third project, until you finally get to a project that needs the funding. Otherwise, I just think there's some, we're going to set up another game-playing scenario here that in 3 or 4 years, someone's going to figure out how to play that game, and we're going to be very sad that we did this.
Tamara?
So I guess I'm having a slight different take on it. I think first it's good that you have to consider contingencies because, like Ryan said, there's always overruns. So I think the no policy was so stringent that there was no choices, and for some of these smaller communities, they're out of luck because they don't have the funding to cover the overruns. I do agree with you that there could be a chance that, like any kind of situation, people can manipulate the system. What I like about it is that it's the community, the whole PPACG community is going to work together, and they're going to figure out if we have cost overruns on 3 out of the 7 projects. If we cancel one of the projects, then the 3 projects get all funded, and we can take care of that. I also like the fact that that cancel project doesn't go right onto the wait list, because to me what that could do is then you just keep canceling projects and it goes right back to the wait list and then you cancel it again. I am concerned about it going back on the next term's competition, because if that project was high scoring project, as a group they could say, you know what, this project is going to always win because it's a high scoring project, so let's cancel that one every time, and then we'll use that cancellation to cover the overruns for each one. To me, that's one area I feel like is a huge loophole right there, but I do like the spirit of this new system is that the community is going to work together. Colorado Springs isn't always going to benefit from this. Greenmount Falls and Woodland Park, they will actually get to benefit from this. And they're all going to have to work together. And isn't that what we're trying to do as a community, is to work together, allocate funds, so there is not favoritism or just inherent, I guess, benefit or inherent, I guess, bias. Exactly. I think that's how we should look at it, but I understand, Kevin, like anything, we can think 10 years from now and someone's going to figure out a way to manipulate it. But that's a very cynical point of view, I think, and I think we need to go into this.
I've been called that before.
That's one of his responsibilities as the first vice chair.
That's in the
Chair in charge of cynicism.
So that's my perspective. I think.
I'm persuaded.
Kevin?
So, yeah, first of all, I'll address Kevin's concern about the, when a project is canceled to pay for another project, and then those remaining funds go to a different project sponsor. We talked about that exact scenario, and the way we talked about it would be any projects that are submitted during that quarter for additional money, they would be ranked in order of how they were originally scored. So that would kind of hopefully take out the political game there. Addressing Tamara's point about this process, I agree. I think it's going to be good about the idea is to keep projects whole. We don't want to cancel projects, and that's why we implemented this process. We want projects to get done, and so that's kind of the idea here. And if you all remember, back in November when I recommended this to the board, PPACG staff had the same recommendation as CAC. It's in our own best interest as staff to keep this structured. So, I mean, I personally feel like this is we did a good process, and I think this is I'm willing to try this. So I have no vested interest in trying to find a loophole in this process.
So would the money from my canceled project fall? I guess I'm trying to figure out how, if you get two other projects that are underfunded, they've got an overrun. Is it based upon where they are in the pecking order of the projects as they were approved? Is that the idea? So that if Michelle's project is higher than Kevin's, hers would be the first one that would get some of that money?
That's the idea. I think that's what we agreed with TAG. Is that correct? Yeah.
Okay, that's the head nod row right over there. They tend to nod their heads a lot.
We didn't explicitly write that, I don't think, but that was I think that was discussed, and I think that was the understanding.
I think that needs to be clarified.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can certainly do that.
The original project scoring retaining
Okay.
throughout the process.
One thing I really appreciate, and I applaud Kevin, is that first of all, the time horizon's shorter. Because crap happens
Yes.
less, at least the window. The other piece of it is I had questions about who reviews, because I've been in contracts where, like when you were talking about the landscaping, it's almost like I knew you were gonna say, and landscaping doesn't get done, and then it's kind of like when a developer comes in and says, and I will build these roads and this, and then, oh, we ran out of money. But one of the things that I put was who reviews, because who keeps, if the process is transparent, and this is happening in the TAC or happening in an environment where it's very visible, then the opportunity for game in the system certainly is reduced, because it's out in the open.
Yeah.
So I guess if it's the project sponsor and some of that is going to happen in a public environment or in a transparent environment, then I'm actually okay with this. Because being a project manager, I've seen overruns and the system game, I've seen it all. So I guess for me, this is logical, but somebody needs to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you just said right there, I mean, implicitly, and if there's any changes, if any of these things happen, it has to go through all the committees anyway.
It is stated in there.
Okay.
Oh, it is. I'm sorry. So Victoria just mentioned that the sentence here.
There it is.
Yep. I just forgot. There's so much to this.
I had to reread it too, so.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
So we have it in there.
One last question from Kevin Walker.
Oh, I was going to make a motion.
Oh, you're going to make a motion? Oh, I'm sorry.
Before the motion?
Okay, well, we're going to have discussion. There's an opportunity for discussion. Do you have a question or a comment?
Well, it's more common.
All right, then let's take the motion.
Say, I move the change in the no policy to what is recommended in this document.
Been moved and seconded. Are there any comments?
Yes, thank you. Kevin, for fear that the business will come today and you think that this is a thankless job, I'd just like to take a moment to say thank you. You've been at this for months. And we're grateful. You've carried the water on this one, and it's not been comfortable or easy. We're talking about the minutia of semantics. And one of my favorite topics, but obviously not that of the general population. And you've been running the ball between all the committees. We're grateful. Thank you for this. This is very clearly worded at this point. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, this is as wonkish as it gets. So, I was in favor first of the no policy because it's just a simple way to stop this stuff. But having listened to the process and the new technologies and the new things that are available to help us communicate a little bit better, I'm in favor of it now.
any other comments? Brian?
I just wanted to thank Kevin, Jim, Bob Baker was at one or two of the meetings, and Kevin and Ken, PPACG staff. It's a really good effort, a lot of work, but I think in the long run this will do a lot to help us stay on track and kind of all understand a little bit better of what we all do. So thank you, appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
There are no further comments. Call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And even though Ellen's comment was not on the point of the motion, I think it was very appropriate.
Thank you.
Can you put the font size?
All right, now wait, he's got one more thing, and then we'll let him off the hook. This is a really hard one. I spent a lot of time. You have 5B, tip amendment 10.
Yep. So we have TIP Amendment 10 this month for 2017 to 2022 TIP. Discover Goodwill of Southern and Western Colorado is requesting to add faster funds into the TIP to purchase 2 vehicles. They're trying to replace 2 buses for their rehabilitation program. So they're requesting to add $112,000 of state faster funds into the TIP with a $28,000 local match. So this $112,000 is new money added to the TIP from CDOT. So yeah, that's all the amendment is for this month.
And the money's there.
I'm sorry?
The money is there.
The money is there after the board approved it, yes.
Any questions? Do I hear a motion? It's a quiet motion. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, thank you.
All right, Ken, you've been very patient today. And you sent us a lot of stuff.
Okay, Ken Prather, Acting Transportation Planner here at PPACG. One of the products that we are required to produce as the Metropolitan Planning Organization is called the Unified Planning Work Program. It is exactly that, plus a little bit more, but it's our work program for the next 2 years. What PPACG is going to do for its planning activities, the federal funds that we expect to receive through CDOT to do that. It's called Unified because it also includes planning activities conducted by our member entities. They may or may not be funded with federal dollars, it doesn't matter, but we do coordinate the regional planning so that people aren't studying the same thing and doing things twice. So it's included. We don't have any approval or disapproval authority over their local planning, but it is included in here. But for us, for PPACG to be able to use and receive the federal funds for planning, we must have a UPWP. It's a 2-year document. It's amended at the end of the first year. The opportunity to verify the federal funds for the second year and the amount, because we're working on estimates right now. And so as those numbers get changed by the amount that the feds do give us, we'll wind up amending either at the end of the first year or mid-year or some other time as appropriate. The primary products of the UPWP are our normal products that we do on a 4-year cycle. We're proposing to finish the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. We're going to try to get it done in September. That'll be the last month of the fiscal year 2019. We must have it approved before November of 2019 because the current one will die at that point. We will approve a new TIP, and as Kevin just described, we will go from a 6-year TIP to a 4-year TIP, so it'll be 2019 to 2022, but that'll be approved June of next year. In 2018, we will have to develop a new UPWP in 2 years for 2020 and 2021. We have to have a congestion management process updated, and that'll be included as part of the 2045 regional plan. There's a lot of sub-plans that are in the regional plan, and that'll be part of it. The memo outlined the highlights of what we're doing. We're going to, right now it's estimated that over the 2 years, we'll get $123,067 more than what we got the last 2 years. So it's pretty close to the same amount, and this is a standard document. Not routine's the wrong word, but we do have to approve a new one every 2 years, and it is the work program. We have 7 work elements, so within the work elements, such as GIS, regional travel demand modeling, regional communications, long-range planning, we break the little over $2 million that's broken down into those work sub-elements for accounting purposes and reporting. We do get a mid-year review by CDOT to make sure that we're on schedule and on task, both time and money, because once this is approved, CDOT will take the work elements out of here, and it will become the scope of work for a contract between us and CDOT to receive those federal funds. Those federal funds do not come to us and to our bank. They come to CDOT, and when we do the work and we submit our invoice to them each month, then those federal funds will come to us to reimburse what we've already spent. All federal money that comes to PPACG is on a reimbursable basis. We spend it first, then they will give us the 82% federal funds that's eligible.
And as I was going through this, is there someone in your staff that's responsible for, I mean, not someone who's looking for all of the elements other than yourself right now, but are those elements subject to, you've got somebody's belly button that you can push to make sure that gets done?
That's me as the acting director.
Over everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, we use the accounting personnel in our accounting department, to collect all of the invoices that we pay contractors, to monitor salaries. I say I work this much on GIS, I work this much on program management, I work this much on travel demand modeling this month. So that's time gets reported to the accounting department. They put all of these documents and invoices together, and the package is prepared, and that goes up to CDOT each month. And then they say, okay, you spent this much, we owe you 82.79%, and they write us a check.
Well, what my question was, for example, element 604 is a transportation improvement program, and I immediately thought of Kevin, the other one, not you. But immediately thought of Kevin Reyes and thought, well, that makes sense. He probably spends most of his life.
Most of his time is spent in that element, that's correct.
Okay.
But anybody else could also do it, that's supporting him in that effort.
All right, and regional communication is something that you all are involved in as well. I mean, that's the
Our
idea.
participation in the I-25 and the US 24 PEL, local entity projects, and sharing information.
Okay. Does anybody else have any more pointed questions for Ken? Go ahead, Aubrey.
How does CDOT determine whether you have achieved the requirement of involving the public in the transportation decision-making process? Are there any criteria?
We track what we do in reaching out to the public and reporting it, and it's that's part of their, what they call a mid-year review, as well as times, we had a public event today where Kevin and Jessica went out to Pikes Peak Community College and collected comments on the targets and performance measures that you've been reviewing and the scenarios. And so there's a slight cost there to register for the booth or something like that. And that becomes part of the monthly invoice that CDOT gets and reviews. But as they go through each of these work elements and the products that we say that we're going to do in our mid-year review and the year-end review, we do have to report on that. And that's where they say, well, you don't seem to be doing enough, or you're going way over budget on this task. What are you going to do? Well, we're going to take money from some other budget, and we'll move money back and forth between these individual work elements, and or we lost personnel. We're not going to be able to do all that we said we're going to do. And so, if we cry well enough, then they'll say, oh, okay, we'll work that into the next year, and we recognize the reason for the delay. And so they do hold us accountable for for the money we receive.
Okay. Jen?
There seems like in going through this, I mean, I'm looking at the second time in this before, but one of the things that, it seems like there's a lot of detail and a lot of elements to monitoring, and I'm going, you monitor everybody's timesheets?
I sign everybody's timesheet.
So you monitor that and make sure that all the timesheets are in every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks. And we have a weekly staff meeting where we're going over, okay, Kevin, where are you on the tip? Where are you on the electronic, the interactive tip on the web? And where are we on the small area forecast? And so, we're.
So the same thing with expenses then?
Yes. I have to, maybe Kevin, starts a check request for some expense, but I have to approve it as a department expense before it goes to accounting and is paid. So there are several review steps. Time sheets I review every 2 weeks as they're prepared and forwarded.
So the contracting elements to make sure that the contracts are being executed the correct way, you monitor all those as well?
Mm-hmm. I don't do as much travel demand modeling as I used to do. I don't do as much travel demand modeling as I used to do because that was my primary expertise. So we have consultants that are on call, and they're also working to help us right now update the model, and they've picked up some of the slack that I could no longer do. So a little bit of extra money be going for those on-call services because I'm asking for some additional hours.
And I think Kevin, Mr. Ken, you have probably a sense of the budget. So if Kevin, for example, spends 80 hours on a task that typically takes 40 hours, then that's when you question why 80 hours.
Then as a supervisor, I would get in and say, I think you could do it faster. What's the problem?
Right, so it's kind of a general oversight.
a lot of,
Well,
oh, yeah.
but I'm looking at the volume of different elements.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, I manage a project, there's volume, but
Mhm.
not to this nth degree on some of the
This
bullet
is-
points on this, and I'm going, it just seems,
Some of it is just very kind of routine, ongoing, day-to-day operations, and yeah, there's not an exact two-page report at the end of the week or something like that. Other things, they are a definite product. You have a tip amendment, you have a new tip, a new plan, a new UPWP. And so there are some definitive products in some cases that definitely could be picked up and looked at.
just out of curiosity, Ken, is, other than money, because that's changed, since I saw the last one, how does this one, as far as structure, vary from the last one?
Very little,
Very little.
very little. I did some wordsmithing because I write differently than Craig did, but we're doing the same things. We started doing the 2040, was the 2050 plan in the last one. Now it's 2045, and we're going to finish it because it's a 4-year process. We already knew we were going to do a tip next year, so that was in the old one. It's still in the new one until we're done. So, yeah, our primary products are very cyclical, so it's, the UPWP doesn't change very much in substance.
Okay, any other questions for Ken? We have a motion to move this forward.
I move we approve the item as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of moving this forward and recommending the board approve, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? My only comment, having finally really read one of these, was that one of the FAST requirements is to emphasize the preservation of the existing transportation system, which if this had existed 50 years ago, we'd still have a trolley. Ken, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Are you going to be Jennifer?
Well, first you've got the citizen at large
Oh, I do, I'm sorry, that's correct.
approval,
That's you.
for which I'm going to say,
Jessica.
I'm Jessica McMullen, and what does the committee have to say? The committee met?
The committee is split 1 to 1 to 1.
There are 3 candidates.
We had interviewed 3 candidates. Jen and I got 3. Sharon got 1. And
I had
a
the wrong date.
miscommunication
Yeah,
on
miscommunication.
time, so missed the other 2. And Jen and I just split. So we're going to have to talk about it some more. Very close, though. I mean, we got 2 really good
and I
candidates.
think it's a little, and for when I've served on the other nomination committees, usually there's a very clear, and I don't think in this case there was.
Okay.
Obviously, we both in the same room, heard the same things, and it wasn't a slam dunk, because I have some reservations. And I think, Kevin
Okay.
had reservations about the candidate there.
So we'll try to bring
Yeah.
you something next month.
Okay, so this will be tabled to next month, and the committee
Yeah,
to
just gonna
just,
have to take a little bit of time.
That's fine.
When we may have to, it's, I don't want to get it.
okay, no. No, you all deliberate and then bring your final decision to us. We don't need to get involved in that anymore, I think, than we need to get involved in helping Ken manage his area. Okay. All right, so that is deferred until next month. Okay, all right.
So I was able to help out the city of Colorado Springs on their interviews for their open positions. Evidently, they had a shortage of council members available to do the interviews.
None?
Well, they had one, and Pico was there, and they couldn't find a second one, and so they asked the 3 of us, and I happened to be available to help out with that. Of the 7 apps that they had, 1 withdrew before the interviews. Another one withdrew within minutes of the interviews beginning because found out they were moving. Another one showed up to tell us in person that they were also going to move. So you can see the candidate list was whittling down rapidly. We had a no-show, and then there were 2 that are scheduled for another time. The long story short of this is the board still has to approve it at their meeting in July, but Tamara's going to be continued. Officially.
Just by default, no one showed up.
No! We told you that before
That's
you left
amazing.
your interview, and we still were waiting on the other bunch, so. Anyway, I just wanted to let everybody know that, so.
Thank you.
And there, forgive me, Michelle, so there are 2 other openings?
There are 2 other openings at the city, and we have 2 more candidates that we haven't been able to schedule interviews between travel schedules and stuff with them.
Okay.
I'm just wondering about the 2 candidates that we interviewed.
Okay.
If we'd like to share them with,
Are you going to do one of those 2 interviews?
That's the plan as I understand it. I'm just waiting to hear back from Jacqueline.
Okay, do you know when you're about?
I'm sorry, what, I'm not
I'm
sure.
just-
We
I'm
got
just
2
thinking
good
if
candidates.
we interviewed 2 for the at-large, would they be interested?
In the city, they'd have to be obviously within the city, but if, assuming they
They
are.
are. They're both.
They both are, okay. I would say that the best option is to get in touch with Jacqueline.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Jacqueline's handling all that. And see what's going on with the other 2, whether they're still interested or if they're moving as well. It was just really
Or
bizarre.
at least have them submit their resume to be interviewed.
Yeah, we interviewed Tamara. And then one of the other guys, like I said, showed up for the interview only to tell us he was leaving. I'm like, okay.
Well, that may be that may be a little bit out.
Yeah, so she would know better what their process is. Okay.
and if you need help from me or Bethany, we can both help with that as well.
Okay, great.
Okay, all right. All right,
I am also going to be Jennifer, much shorter and with straighter hair. Scenario planning workshop overview. It's all on the website, and everyone who attended got it online. Would you guys like to know anything else? Okay, 10 seconds. The follow-up to this are outreach events. We're going to be in Woodland Park at the Farmers Market on June 30th. We're at the Tri-Lakes 4th of July celebration on July 4th. We're at the Fountain Thunder in the Valley Car Show on July 8th. We're at the Manitou Farmers Market on July 13th. And we're at the El Paso County Fair in Calhoun on July 15th and 16th, where we will be asking people to please tell us what they think the most important and impactful contributing factor to each of the 3 scenario types are.
Okay.
There was a hand raise.
Yeah, I mean, I basically was wondering the process about how you're taking input. I think there was supposed to be another step at the scenario planning workshop that we didn't have time for, to be able to sort of hone in on which was the best sort of synopsis.
Yeah, and what they did is they took all the results from those and tried to see where things overlapped, and pretty much every table really did overlap in their dominant things. They might have phrased it differently.
Okay.
But so they discovered that there kind of was already a given story for each, which is why we redirected.
See that sort of synopsis?
Absolutely.
Presented to the public?
Yes. And I will.
Could I ask, please send me those dates and locations?
Yes.
I will present at our ASC board, we have membership coming, and I can go to folks that are transportation involved. And I'll send it out.
I'll email out to everyone. We would love for you to encourage people to come have a say and sign up for emails with more information.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tamara.
thanks, Jennifer. Short Jennifer.
I know, I'm a great short Jennifer.
Okay, coming up for the next CAC meeting, we will have Casey Partridge here to talk about finance. I think Casey's going to be the one. And I'm looking forward to that. You may find that, people who know me may find that unusual. But I think it's going to be important so that we can understand the financials as we see them. I will tell you that I am concerned that I'm not seeing where the revenue is coming from, and I'm not sure how the various fiscal years meld together. So that's something I'm going to be interested in. And then we'll have the report from Kevin Reyes on the tip delayed projects that we've talked about. I think we're coming up on the first anniversary of that conversation, so we'll look forward to that in July. Anything else that anyone knows of or that we?
Forgive me, Jim, the date on that one?
Is July 26th.
Oh, it's the day before.
The day before the 27th.
I mean, for Kenya on the 27th.
For Kenya?
Well, maybe,
Submission is not.
maybe. If we get our work done.
Yeah, if we get our work done, we'll be able to leave. Aubrey?
I may or may not be at the July meeting, pending arrivals, but I intend to only miss probably 2 meetings, for whether I make it to that one or not.
Well, hope things that go very safely and well, and everybody ends up happy and healthy at the end of the process.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Would
Courtney?
the committee like an update on the downtown terminal steering committee? We have a meeting scheduled with Mayor Suthers on July 12th, I believe, and then we'll have some more information.
Yes,
Do you want us to
yes,
try
we would
to
like that.
incorporate that? Okay.
Yes.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, very good idea.
Can either be myself or Jen, because we're both on that.
Mhm.
We can
That would be great.
talk about it.
Yeah.
All right, anything else for the good of the cause? Ellen, I need to talk to you briefly at the end. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
When's your due date? When's your due date?
August 1st.
August 1st, okay.
You were very good, Jennifer. I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have taken a second
second
longer.
one.
Although, well,
She was.